Hi, welcome back to the shed for episode 35 of the ES335 build, and this time we're going to carry on with the headstock by finishing off cutting the inlays. Okay, so there's the main logo cut out and looking very swish, and I think that is going to look brilliant when it's in position. However, I'm not done with the inlay yet. There's another element I want to add, and some of you might be aware that a few weeks ago I lost my buddy and shop partner Jim Bob the dog, and as he passed away while I was making this guitar, I'm going to dedicate the guitar to his memory. And to that end I want to do something on the headstock that kind of I can relate to him and will remind me of him every time I play the guitar. Now, Jim Bob was half Dalmatian and half Border Collie, and for anyone who's out there thinking that they might want to do that, I wouldn't. It leads to a very, very energetic and frankly crazy dog, but very lovable nonetheless. However, he was a bit of a spotty dog, and I always called him my spotty superstar. So I'm going to put a little star motif into the headstock. So I printed out various sizes. I'm thinking I'm somewhere down this end of the scale that I'll be actually using. But Jim Bob had a marking on his forehead that looked like 5 of his little dots connected together into an almost a paw print shape. So I'm going to put one of these stars cut out in mother of pearl into the headstock, but I'm also going to inlay those 5 little dots into the star. So the first step is I'm going to cut a couple of these stars out, and I'm going to see which one I think fits best onto the headstock. Okay, so I immediately think the smaller of the two is probably the better size. That's going to make doing the little inlay inside the inlay a little bit harder, but I'm willing to go there on this occasion, so that's not a problem at all. So the next thing is I need to get this little star mounted onto the mother of pearl, and again I'm just going to use some super glue to do that. And I think a big part of my success on the second go at cutting the logo out was getting everything to stick a little bit better. And what I did was I just cleaned the mother of pearl down with some acetone before I glued anything onto it. That might have been the trick. It might not have been, but I'm going with it anyway. Right, give that a few minutes to dry off and we can get cutting. Okay, so we're ready to go. I've got my jeweler's saw again, and again I'm going to have the vacuum running at all times just to take away as much of this horrible dust as I can. So I had a couple of comments after the last episode about how calm I was when I broke the initial headstock inlay that I made. In reality, I'm very new to working with mother of pearl, so I actually fully expected to break at least 1 or 2 inlays on the way to getting a good one. So to get a good one on the second go for me was a bit of a bonus. But that's not really the whole story. I think a big part of my philosophy is that if you're going to be really good at something, you by default have to go through that stage where you suck. It's an absolutely vital part of the process. Because ultimately it's the mistakes you make while you're crap at something that give you the learning opportunities to make yourself much, much better. And what people didn't see in the video was that between the first occasion where I broke it into 4 pieces and the second occasion where I actually got the result that I wanted, I sat down, I did a lot of thinking, I reviewed some of the footage, and I learnt what I'd done wrong and thought of ways to do it better. And I think this is a very useful skill to have, to be able to own your mistakes and take the lessons from them. For me, I think that's the difference between being able to accumulate 30 years experience at something or having 1 year's experience 30 times. It's also worth bearing in mind that while this was the first time I've done this kind of mother of pearl work, it's not the first time I've had to cut something out to a paper template. It's not the first time I've had to cut something to very fine tolerances with a jeweler's saw, and it's also not the first time I've had to clean something up with files and sandpaper, etc. into the exact shape that I want. So ultimately I brought quite a lot of skills into that job that probably would have made it much more difficult if I didn't have them. And I think that's a kind of important thing to bear in mind. And there's almost like a cumulative effect. As you get more experienced in doing some things, it makes the next set of things easier to do. But the really important thing is to not get disheartened, to understand that you might ruin some stuff, and that's just part of the process of becoming better at what it is you're trying to do. I hope that makes sense and explains to some extent my philosophy on how to come to a successful conclusion with some of these jobs that I do. Okay, and the step I didn't really show on the last one was just the cleaning up process. And on this particular item I can get away with just a small diamond file to clean this up. On the logo itself, I used the file where I could, but I was also reduced to using a feeler gauge with some sandpaper, double-sided tape to it, but it sounds a bit bizarre, but it worked. So if it works, it's not stupid. So I'm just going to get the vacuum back on and then just go around this little star and clean everything up nicely to the lines. Okay, so I'm working on the design that I want to put into this little star, and this is the little marking on Jim Bob's head that I'm talking about. And if we kind of stylize that a little bit, what we kind of get is that arrangement. And if we look at that against the star, if I get it the right way up, it fits very nicely into that star configuration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a tiny little hole kind of just at the junction of each one of these little pointy bits, and then fill those with some black super glue, and that will give me my little pattern. It might not be immediately obvious what it's meant to represent, but I'll always know. Okay, let's get marking and drilling. Okay, so I've got this set up in the drill press. The star's super glued and masking tape down to a block that's held in the vise, and I'm going to try and drill 5 little 1.5mm holes into this mother of pearl without breaking it. Wish me luck. I'm not aiming for like a super uniform pattern here. It's kind of an abstraction of the marking that I'm after. It is a very small detail. I don't want it to be like symmetrically perfect. I want it to have more meaning than that. So here goes. Okay, with that done, I'm going to take off this top layer of masking tape. I came a little bit close to the edge with one of them, but I'm actually happy with that. I think that's come out as well as I could expect it to. And now I'm just going to take some black super glue, one of these really fine applicator nozzles. Just fill each hole up. Make sure there's plenty in. Seems to be going right the way through and not filling them up. So I'm going to have quite a lot of super glue on the other side, I think. I'll just leave that for a minute to set up. And then I'm just going to hit that with some 240 grit wet and dry paper. I'm not too bothered about using rough paper at this stage. There's probably a lot of sanding to be done to this inlay once it's in situ. Okay. A little bit gappy, so we'll just put a bit more in. Leave that to go off and repeat the sanding process. Okay, and there we have it, and I'm actually quite pleased with that because it is, from my eye anyway, a decent representation of what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, happy with that. Okay, so with that done, the next stage is to get both this and the other inlay mounted into this piece of ebony that's going to form the veneer. Again, that's going to be a really challenging job, and again, it's something I haven't done before. But that's going to be something for next time. So I'm going to leave this episode here. So as always, like if you've liked, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.